See if now someone asked you, how are you? Like now you'd actually be able to answer. Because that's really what we're looking at. It's just like sitting there and really taking the time to just look and feel like, yeah, how am I? Like, what is happening here? You know, when we're asked that question, we often respond in terms of stories, right? Which I'm not saying is wrong or anything. I'm just saying usually it's like, oh, how are you? It's like, oh, well, here's what's going on, and here's like the narrative. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that that's like incorrect or anything. But it's only like one dimension of being a person, and actually I think it's actually it's a real art form or a real, maybe art form's not the right word. Let's call it a practice, I suppose. But like it's a real practice to actually really sense and feel deeply in our bodies, like what is really happening for us. I'm apparently hot. I just felt that deep in my body. And a lot of times what's really going on is very physical. I mean, it may not have its roots in that, but there's a physical manifestation. And so when we really pause and take the time to just sense our being, sense our body, but in a kind of prolonged, sustained way. So it's not like a snapshot. It's not like, how am I? Okay, got it. Right, like, oh, hold on, let me check in, boom, and I'm back. But to actually really stay with ourselves for, and that was about 30 minutes. We just stayed with ourselves for 30 minutes. And it's a kind of deep listening. And it takes a while, right? Did you notice that? It doesn't all like reveal itself all at once. And one of the things we end up working with a lot is, that you may have discovered, actually maybe we could talk about this a bit, is the obstacles to that. Right, because it sounds kind of simple enough, right? Well, go ahead, sense your body, see what's going on. Okay. But what we're practicing is a kind of attention that doesn't interfere. And that's actually, that's a bit of an art form. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think that's a bit of an art form. To really pay attention in a way that doesn't interfere with the experience. That just watches and observes without meddling. And it's kind of hard to do. There's a real yeah, it's like it takes time to cultivate that. Because often there's well, I'm actually curious to hear how it was for you. I mean, I know in myself, I will often notice, especially in the beginning, this like urge to fix it, to change it, to analyze it, to improve it, to solve it, to get somewhere to do something about what's happening. And do you guys experience that? Do you know what I'm talking about? And what often I find that if you look at that closer, you can actually, if you kind of like peek behind the curtain, it'll actually reveal to you like all the reasons you think, all the things you believe that make you think that the way you feel at any given moment is wrong. You based on ideas that it should somehow be different. I guess I would say for me over 20 years of practice now, like, in some ways that's been one of the main trajectories is that gap, like, between how I think things should be and the way they are, at least in myself. Those two things getting, like, closer and closer and closer. And so half of it, or some part of it, is just sensing what's happening now. But then the other side of it is actually being okay with that. Because you know what I mean? Because you can sense what's happening now, and you're like, oh, I'm aware, and I hate it. Like, I'm not okay with it at all, but I am aware of it. But in a way to kind of surrender and accept in a kind of graceful, loving way, that, yeah, like, I'm like this right now. This is just what's happening right now. And most human suffering is really caused by this inability to just be okay with how we are, right? And all the forms that takes. I've often found this to be like kind of the most sort of amazing and weird things about humans. I don't know, maybe some of you heard me talk about this before. There's like this fictitious conversation I've been having for years. It's like been this weird thing I've been into for decades, where what I imagine is this scenario where some like alien anthropologists have come down to Earth to study humans, and somehow they picked me to be like the liaison, and they got all these questions, and I have to try to explain human beings. And so they ask all kinds of questions that seem really obvious, and I have to try to explain. And one of the most puzzling ones that, in my mind, that they find most weird, is trying to explain this idea that, like, humans are uncomfortable with their experience. And I could just imagine, again, I mean, I'm not crazy, I'm just making this up, I'm aware of this. Don't worry, I won't tell them you're here. Is just this idea that I could imagine that they would be like, wait, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, it's like, yeah, well, there's this person, see that? And they don't like themselves, see? I'm like, well, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, they kind of, they think they're horrible, and they're like, well, I can imagine them asking, like, well, does everyone else feel that way? Like, no, actually, everyone else likes this person. Like, yeah, nobody else says that. It's just an internal dialogue this person's having. But I imagine to these sort of innocent alien creatures that this seems very puzzling, that any being would just like be so uncomfortable in their own skin. And I'm guessing, I think they would ask, well, like, are all like beings on this earth like this? I was like, no, actually, we're the only ones. And all the other animals seem okay with just being themselves. They don't really, they're not trying to achieve things, or like, I don't know, they just are. But not humans. We're pretty upset with ourselves. So to me, that really is in many ways like the crux of the practice, is actually just becoming okay with how you are. Not even who you are, because that gets deep, right? Like who you, but just how you are. Just what, like in this moment. Like Ajahn Sumedho always like, right now it's like this. And in parentheses, what he means is like, right now it's like this, and in parentheses like, and I'm all right with that. You know, that's like what's implied in his tone, of just like, it's the acceptance that, well, yeah, this is what's happening. It's just kind of staggering when you really think about how much conflict we can have with what is. Again, and I don't mean like politically or in the world, but just in this moment. I just mean like you sit there and you're like, yeah, I don't like this. Just this whole thing right now. I'm just not into this.
The aliens and all of it.
What's that?
So the aliens and all of it.
Yeah, just don't like it. And it's interesting, like when I work with students and with my own mind, like often there's a sense of like, no, like I wanted it to be like this other way. And then if you probe a bit, like it's like, well, I don't know what way. Like just better, I don't know, just different than this. I remember one of my teachers used to like to say, he'd say, like the wanting mind just knows that, like, I don't know how I want it to be, but this isn't it. Like, I'm not sure how it's supposed to be, but this isn't. Clearly, this isn't it. And it's quite profound when we can sort of let go into it and accept that, no, actually, it is like this. And even our not liking it is just also part of what it is. Do you see what I mean? That you can accept the battle with what is can actually be accepted as just another thing that just is, and can be watched and seen like the rest of it. And you can just watch it. You're like, oh yeah, look at that. The funny thing is, the moment you see that and accept that and watch it, you no longer are actually in conflict with it. Do you see what I mean? That even upon seeing the conflict, but once you see it clearly, like once you can discern it, then it's just another thing that is. What do you guys think? I'd love to. Is there any questions or comments or Josh?
I was just thinking of moments when people ask me, how are you doing? And I'm like, I'm okay. And then like, you're just okay. And they make that a problem in some way. I feel like that's the tone. So that was just, I think, a cultural thing that this discussion made me think of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the kind of inflation of
like,
good feelings.
Yeah, actually, it's okay to be okay.
Yeah. Back in my day, it was okay just to be okay. But with you millennials, you got to be like uber okay. Yeah. I mean, that question, I'm not nitpicking that. I mean, obviously, when most of us kind of say it, a lot of times it's a greeting. I mean, it's not a formal question. And I think, obviously, it's part of the culture. But, it's funny. My teacher, you know what he always would say? Like, if I say I'm okay, he'll say, what kind of okay? Because he'll always bring me back to the experience. Like he's always coming at it from this place of curiosity, like this inquiry of like, okay, great, you're okay. What kind of okay? How does it feel to be okay? Like, what is that? Like, what do we mean? And then it's kind of this kind of trick, because every question he asks always causes me to have to go back to my experience to answer it. Like I always have to he has this way of asking these questions that always brings me back to my direct, like I have to actually inquire into the direct experience of the moment to answer it. And I don't think it actually matters what the answer is. It's just what matters is that quality of attention that is evoked just to answer the question. And the answer is just like, whatever, that's just how you happen to be now. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
You said something earlier about, and I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I'm thinking this is the way things are, but is that really the way things are? As if there was like one set of reality and another set of reality? So your mind is telling you what you're thinking about yourself. And then you ask, but is that really how it is? I guess my question is, who's determining if it really is what's going on? If it's not your mind, then who else is determining that, well, actually the reality of the situation is different than your perception? So who owns that second logic?
I think Cassandra does. Sorry.
It wasn't me, really.
No, I'm not sure what you're asking. Like, if you mean, like when I say it's like this, I mean for me or for each of you. I mean, I'm talking about subjective reality, just kind of what it's like for any of us at any given moment. I'm not necessarily saying like, and that's the way it is in some ultimate, like, enlightened sense. Although interestingly, one kind of leads to the other. And I guess, I'm not sure if this is what you're asking, but this is the point I'm trying to sort of guide us to, is that there's a difference between a kind of direct experiencing and a kind of, like a kind of commentary, sort of assessing, judging, kind of labeling, mental construct kind of experiencing. Like, I think this is what I think of that, this is what I think, I like this, I don't like this. It's all sort of very reactionary. But if I just sit here, like I can feel there's a kind of sensation on my arm right now, like, I don't know, from the air or whatever, but there it is. Now, I can feel that directly, and that seems very true, like that's just happening. Like that's just a direct knowledge. Now then my mind actually can go, oh, it's because of the air, and it's this, and oh, that's nice, or that's not. And see, those are like layers on top. That's already kind of my personal reactivity to it. But the sensation itself, just like a pretty raw form of it, that just is. And so when I say that's the way it is, that I mean that. All the sort of explanations and analysis on top of that, that's really not highly reliable. Because how often have I thought it was something, and then it turns out like, it's like, oh, I was convinced it was this, and I had a whole story around it, and then it turns out it's like, yeah, you were completely wrong. It wasn't that at all. But just the in the moment direct experience was still what it is, right? So there's a kind of layer that's sort of direct experience, and then there's what we might call interpretation. Now, I'm not sure if that's like at all speaking to what you were saying, but is that does that sort of clarify? And as far as who owns it, I'm not sure what do you mean, like who's the knower? Like what is it that's knowing? What is it that's doing?
I think it's, sometimes if you're with a teacher, you feel like they're looking through you, and they have a greater understanding of where you're at than how you feel, where you are yourself, and you're
right, sure,
you're shuffling around.
Right.
So it's that there's someone is perceiving sort of a wiser perception of your own reality, and then it's like, well, how do they know this better than you?
Because they're more present than you. That's really what it is. It's like if you're present and you're just here, you can actually look at people and you can see quite a lot. You can see just so much by, their tone, the body language, just the feel of it. Just the way the person. It's actually, to go back to animals, you could look at an animal and actually tell a lot about how it's doing, and it hasn't said anything. But just the way it's kind of moving and the way its body language is and its energy, you can see like, oh, that's a happy animal. It feels good, or this one doesn't, or this one's scared, or this one's, angry. Like it's you can really just see it. It's like it is what it is. It's very, and they haven't said anything. You can't be like, hey, how are you? And it's like it's right there. But in a way, it's more direct, right? I mean, sometimes you listen to a person and it's quite confusing. Well, because what you're getting is what they think they're. I mean, in that sense, it can get quite convoluted. So that's what it is. It's like whether it's with others or with ourselves, we're kind of settling into a more, what we sometimes call somatic experience. Somatic means of the body, like just a kind of in the moment direct experience, like flavor, smell. Like something when you like taste something and it's just. And then you might start thinking like, oh, I love this flavor. This reminds me of this thing I ate that one time, or whatever. But before all that, there's just the flavor of it, or just the smell of it. And so when we're meditating, we're kind of actually practicing just staying there, just staying at that direct experience level, and minimizing all the reactivity. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm.
I realized when you were talking about okay, not okay, that I use it in a couple different ways, and I wasn't really even aware of the difference. So there's the level of okay, which is not good and not bad experience. Like I'm okay, I'm having an okay experience. And then there's I'm okay with it. So that's the difference between a mid-level experience and the accepting of the experience. And both of those are I'm okay, or I'm not okay. I'm not okay, I'm not accepting this experience, I'm not okay, I'm having a less than okay experience. And just kind of when I'm interchanging those and even when your teacher's asking, what do you mean by okay? How much of that is, are you talking about acceptance, or are you talking about a level of experience? Are you even aware of which one you're talking about, but how your answer kind of interacts with that? I don't know, it made me think anyway.
Yeah, I mean, and what's significant is that what you're calling the acceptance level of okay, that if you're okay on that level, the non-okayness of the experience will actually be very positively influenced, and then
it's dynamic.
What's that?
And then it's dynamic.
Right, and then also, but worse in the other direction, where it's like, well, I'm kind of not feeling great, and I'm hella not okay with that. So now I actually feel a lot worse, and I'm even more not okay with that. So now I feel even worse, and on and on and on. You see what I mean? So there's this kind of like, I'm having an experience, I'm reacting to that experience, now I'm reacting to that reaction, and off we go. Whereas if you're okay with being not okay, there is a kind of, this is what I mean, it's like then you're not adding to it. You're just like, hey, it's just there. And the thing is that if you just let an experience be, often it kind of actually will regulate itself. But often what's happening is we're really like adding fuel to the fire. And that's what's really difficult. This is what I mean by not meddling. It's like, it's funny, there's this analogy has popped into my mind, but it actually has this dharmic quality to it. You know, if you're sitting in front of a fire, I imagine, you know, I've never done this, but I imagine it would be hard to do. Like if you were sitting in front of a fire and you had like extra wood, and you just sat there and watched it go out and didn't add wood to it. Like if you just imagine it, doesn't that seem kind of hard to do? Like don't you just, like as it starts to go down, you know how everyone loves to play with the fire, like, and just like throw in a few, just want to keep adding stuff to it. That's kind of what this is, right? It's like, so, but can you just watch it and just, oh yeah, it's getting small and I'm not going to interfere. Like, oh yeah, it's going out. Like, I'm just going to let it do its thing. Like, I'm not going to meddle with it. Now, what's interesting about that analogy, though, is that nibbana or nirvana, that term, you know, so that's what they talk about enlightenment is nirvana. Now, that term actually means the extinguishing of the passions. And what it means is, well, okay, this is really, don't quote me on any of this, because this is not the most technical. But what they talk about, like when they just talk about the fire going out. That's like an image that's often used in the sutras. The image of just like the fire going out, and that as humans we're kind of burning with experience. Like there's like we're sort of like our senses are sort of like on fire, and we keep like throwing more logs on the fire, and that. Yeah, you just talk about like the relief, like if you just imagine a fire just going out. I don't know, it's a nice image, isn't it? I like it. So let me just get a couple, yeah.
I have this dog, like 12 years, the happiest dog, and got her name Blue, maybe the cutest dog too. And, he got 13 teeth removed 3 years ago, and the vet was like, he's gonna be fine. I was like, no way he's gonna be fine. He was fine. He was super cool. And then this Friday, he had 8 more. And they were like, he's like, he asked to have his canines taken. And for me, I was like, what? It's canines, right? It's canines. And the vet said, he's gonna be fine. You're the one that's gonna have a problem. And I'm like, no way, that was canines. And I was just watching it the next day and today and yesterday. He's happy as can be.
Yeah, right, because it just is. He's not. There's nobody in there who's going, oh, they fucking took out my teeth. Now I'm like this. What's that? I should have brushed more. Yeah. I should have brushed. That other dog's got better teeth than me.
My master's not gonna love me no more.
Yeah, my master's not gonna love me, or maybe it's his fault that I lost my teeth. Yeah, you know what you see all these like 3-legged dogs nowadays. Now, as an off topic, I think like was there some like advancement in the veterinary arts that happened since like in the last 10 or 20 years? Because I don't know, when I was growing up, I don't remember ever seeing so many 3-legged dogs. No, I'm serious. What's that? Right, and they figured out a way to do it. Yeah, now you see them all the time. But you know what's a trip? Do you notice like they don't care? Like they're like, whatever. I had some legs. I still have some legs. Like they moved on. They're like, whatever, man. I got it. But it's like that same thing. They're just so present in the now that like, whatever. I'm like going. I don't know.
Now he gets wet food.
Now he gets wet food. Even better. Yeah.
I'm thinking about things that upset one, repetitively.
Yeah.
Like, I had a situation with someone at work last year. It was, I worked with a lot. It got to where it got, and then now it's coming up again.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking about it's not really a question, but I'm just thinking about if I'm sitting with the experience of it and wanting to be okay with that experience, it's not helpful to think about how this is the same thing that happened last year. But that my mind goes to that. And I just wonder what you think about that. Like, it's like, in a way, it's me not being okay with it, because it's me trying to solve it. Oh, I thought I solved it last year. By it, I mean solve my own reaction to it, not change that other person.
Yeah. I mean, I would be careful just of turning these kinds of things into some kind of like, well, I should not think that way, or you know what I mean? Because, I don't know, like, it's coming up that way, you're thinking about how it happened last year. I don't know that there's anything wrong with that, I mean, if it did happen last year, now here it is happening again, and yeah, I mean, if something happens like a second time, it feels different than the first time, and you know what I mean? Like if you're feeling some added frustration because like, oh shit, here it is again, I would kind of honor that as just another facet of the experience. See, this isn't about being like happy and okay with everything. It's being okay with it being the way it is. You see the difference? So you might be like, yeah, this is really frustrating. And, but it's very helpful to bring compassion to your own experience. Like, oh wow, this really sucks for me. Like that, that's disappointing, or it's, I don't know, whatever the situation is. And to be able to kind of tolerate that. I mean, that's actually one of the things we really have a hard time is tolerating, like, uncomfortable feelings. Like can you get your feelings hurt in some way? It's actually really hard to just get your feelings hurt and just be like, ouch, I just got my feelings hurt, okay. And just like, it's like, man, we don't do this. It's like, no, I gotta fucking rah, 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 rah. It's like, and it's just like everything other than just like, why don't you just have some hurt feelings for a minute? Like, because that's what happened. But that's why it's hard to be with these things. It's hard to accept them. So instead we do all these things to, to deal with it. That this is what the Buddha is talking about, is that it keeps it keeps producing new karma, right? Like, so then, well, like this person pissed me off, so then I did this thing, and then that created a whole other situation. So then they did this thing, and then on and on and on it goes. Whereas if initially, like, I could have just been with the pain of it or whatever, I may not needed to have reacted in some way that was going to then be harmful to me or to them or to the whole situation. Now that doesn't mean that there isn't a time to respond. I like that one. People talk about responding rather than reacting. And to me, like, responding just seems wiser. It's like reacting, in my mind, feels very kind of compulsive or impulsive, like sort of almost, it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction. Whereas responding is like, hey, I actually could be with those feelings. I'm okay with it. Like, I'm not overwhelmed by this experience. And now I reflect on it, and maybe I choose to take some action or, do something about the situation. But from a kind of wise, place that's, again, not reactive. It's not like, fuck, I gotta get away from this. It's like, no, there's no rush. I can be with this. But I'm also gonna do something about it. But it's not because, holy shit, I gotta get this feeling, I gotta have this feeling stop as fast as possible. It's like I'm not necessarily in a hurry to change it, but I am making these decisions. Does that make sense?
Sort of. I mean, it helps me see that I think I dealt with my reaction to it externally, like making sure I didn't perpetuate it toward other people. But I don't think I was accepting that I still felt shitty. So I'm trying to avoid that shitty feeling.
Yeah. It's some of the most amazing experiences I've ever had in my life where I just would let myself feel shitty.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds funny but to say that, but I've just had so many times where I'm like, oh, right, I just feel shitty, okay. Like, what's that like? What kind of shitty? Like, what does shitty even feel like? What do I mean when I say shitty? And really explore it as an in-the-moment direct experience. You see, yeah. Yeah.
Too, though, that sometimes, especially when a really strong emotion comes up, it's actually okay to like get yourself out of, the situation and like sit with the experience kind of from a farther vantage point. Because I think that builds that resiliency to being in the experience. And so like as an example, like one of the impulses I used to really, really have strongly was I'd start getting frustrated in my classroom and like the impulse to run out of the room and leave was there frequently. And so I gave myself like a little tiny out, which was walking to the door and opening it and taking a breath and checking in and being like, oh, okay, frustration is here. Okay, well, I don't have to do anything right now. I'm just taking the time that I needed and then coming back in. And you don't actually need that long.
Yeah.
Like I've definitely dealt with things, especially recently, like, and especially with other people, like having to needle through like somebody else's shitty behavior, making me feel shitty, and having to figure out, like, am I feeling shitty because I'm telling a story about it, or am I feeling shitty because this was a shitty thing for this person to do, and their behavior is making me crazy. And so, like, having to balance that out, and sometimes I think, like, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from anyone was this teaching coach I worked with, who was like, you don't have to respond to everything in the moment. And I was like, and what she was really talking about was responding to other people in the moment. I do have to respond to me and take care of me. And the more that I follow that, the more I don't have these big hook experiences when it's all of a sudden like, I mean it.
Yeah, and what you're describing is what, like, the Buddha would call skillful means, right? So, like, taking that break or leaving, like, yeah, because if you can't be with the experience, then you just can't, right? And just because you're sitting still with your eyes closed, sadly, it doesn't actually necessarily mean you're being with your experience. Like, I know I've sat on many retreats where it was like, yeah, I sat for many hours, but I was in full reactivity. Just, yeah, I had my eyes closed and I wasn't moving, but internally it was nothing but reactivity. So I think it is, you're right. I mean, it's important to know like, hey, I'm overwhelmed right now. Like, I'm not actually being with this. And then, yeah, like you need a break or something. I mean, you need more support or something.
I think that takes knowing what overwhelmed feels like.
Yeah.
A really good sense of that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't come back.
But check this out, though. You learn what that feels like by actually having some moment where you don't feel overwhelmed. To go, oh shit, all that other time I was overwhelmed. And so that's where I think meditation can be very helpful, because every once in a while you'll have these states of peace or something, and then you'll realize, like, oh shit, the rest of the time I'm a fucking mess. I just thought that's what life was like. I just thought that was it, So these kind of I don't know, call them altered states that you can get into through meditation, they can be very helpful for that reason, because they can give you something to compare to. Sorry, is live here, Paul?
Yeah, I've got a question online from Mel. He's not in the room tonight.
Oh.
He said,
Hey, man.
First, hi, Gene. It's good to have you back. One sensation that I struggle with is tiredness, and that tiredness can be interpreted as sadness. And so he starts spinning into these depression narratives really quickly after that, right?
Right.
And it's like these deep grooves that he falls into really quickly, and he can't really find an interrupt for it sometimes. So I guess he's tried, do you respond with compassion to the feelings of sadness that are a result of these misinterpretations? Or do you simply just return to the body? How would you deal with something like that?
Yeah, I mean, compassion is always good, and yeah, like actually, it's very helpful to have. Compassion is so important because you can have compassion for all the ways that you can't be okay. You know, so you can have compassion for, like you're trying to, you're like, you hear this, you're like, oh, that's great, okay, that makes sense. Like, okay, I'm gonna try this. And then you go home and you kind of try it and it doesn't work at all. Right? And it's just like, it just doesn't work. And you feel horrible, and you can just have compassion for that. Just like, oh shit, like this sucks. Like I can't even do this. Like I'm not okay. And I'm having all these reactions and I'm feeling sad, and it is getting into this depression thing. And like, fuck, this all sucks. And then you can just have compassion for all of that. And that's really, because again, what that'll do is it kind of pops you back into this present. Because now you can see all this whole mess. And by having compassion for it, you're sort of seeing it rather than being lost in it. And then also, I would just say, Mel, another thing, we've talked about this before. This is really weird, by the way, that I'm talking to you over the camera, and that you're not here in the room. Is reaching out to other people. You know, there's a way that this practice, I think, it's kind of tricky because there's this balance between kind of solitude of like, okay, I'm just going to be with myself, be with my body, just feel this, but then not isolating, and then still being connected with other people, and especially if you're kind of getting into this rut where it's kind of going deeper and deeper, connecting with other people is actually hugely important, and sort of going inside isn't instead of connecting with others. Sorry. Okay, and then we'll go there. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say that like the feeling of aloneness that sometimes accompanies feeling lost, depressed, really anxious. There's also like a higher power. You know, it's like for me, I feel like I can't do this alone.
Right.
I'm just not able to. I don't understand, or I don't know what I'm feeling. And for me, I've had to learn this. You know, I've had sort of a lot of experience, but like to just let it go. Just really like, I hand it over to, I don't know if it's Eugene or somebody, but I'm handing it over. I'm just like, I'm not taking it on anymore. I can't do this alone.
Right.
And that's really helpful for me because it's the same thing of reaching out to, if I have somebody I can call, or if I have somebody I can be with, a family or whatever, that's one thing. But just if I'm all alone, sometimes I just have to say, I surrender.
Yeah.
That's a really, for me, it's like that actually gets me to the point where I can then be with the moment.
Right.
As opposed to like fighting it or confused and all that other stuff.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, that's kind of the beauty of it, is that when you do that, you notice that like it's like you're like, well, that's it. I'm not doing it anymore. And it's like nothing actually changed. I mean, you may feel better, but like it's funny because it's not like all of a sudden everything drastically changes, which is funny because then you realize like, oh, I wasn't really doing it in the first place. You know? And that's kind of, again, something that can be experienced very directly in meditation, because you're just sitting there, and then you just, after a while, you can see like, oh, this body just does its own, like, I don't actually need to do anything. This thing just like breathes itself, and it just, like, you don't have to do, it's not a I think a lot of times we're kind of like, they have those things for like the babies in the baby seat, and they have this like the fake steering wheel in the car, and the baby like maybe thinks like it's driving. I was like, it was really never driving. I think that's what we're like a lot of times. It's like this illusion of control where you're like, oh yeah, like, and it's like, no man, like, I know it seems like that, but you're not really in control. So then when you give up the control, it's like, imagine a baby at some point being like, I don't even have to do this shit. This doesn't do anything. Why am I even doing this? Like, I can just relax. What's that? Every once in a while. Right. So, Sarah, just last one. You had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about what seems to be happening when I'll have one of those feeling things you're talking about.
One of the what?
One of these emotional things you keep talking about. So I will want to observe, and it will vanish.
Yeah.
I'll be pissed off, like, okay, where'd you go?
Right. Right.
And something will happen, and I know I'm miserable. I will sit with, God damn it.
Yeah.
Now, am I just deliberately looking where I know it's not, so I don't have to deal with it? Is it sneaking around somewhere else so it can come back later?
It's great, and that's how it is. Is that I think what happens a lot of times when you look at it directly, you become more present, and by looking, it's like your relationship to it changes. See, a lot of what we feel, a lot of what we experience isn't. We mostly experience our reaction to whatever is happening, not what it is that's happening. You know? Like, so by saying, okay, well, let me look at it, you actually, just in that moment, you're very radically changing the way you're relating to it, like your reaction to it. Because for one thing, before, if it's something you don't like, how you're trying to push it away, right? When you start looking for it, you're like, okay, hold on, let me really check it out. Well, instantly in that moment, you're not rejecting it anymore. You see what I mean? Because you're actually going, no, I want to see it. Like, I want to, that's what you meant, right? That you're like, all right, let me look, I want to check it out. Like, well, already you're not rejecting it. So it changes the cocktail, so to speak. Because what you feel, what you're feeling before, like a lot of times it's some combination, it's like, well, there's this pain and my hatred of the pain and like my desire to get rid of it. And you put all those elements together, and that's what actually comprises the experience. You see what I mean? No, but that's what it is. This is actually hard to see. I mean, this is what the Buddha said. It's not. I'm not making this up. So it's like this. It's a combination of the direct experience and then all the layers of reactivity. So if you change one of them, like, it's like, well, that experience had a lot of rejection in it. So if I become curious about it, I've already changed that major ingredient. So the whole flavor of the whole thing, it will actually change. And that's what's great, is a lot of times if you do that, it's like this thing, you're like, oh, I'm so miserable. And you look at it, it's like, it's suddenly gone. You're like, oh, yeah, where was that? So yeah, that's just like you're experiencing the power of presence. And that's what getting present's no small thing. It's genuinely transformational. That would probably be a good word to use. And what I like about that word, transformational, is that it doesn't mean that I changed it. Like, by engaging in this process, like, some sort of transformation takes place. But not something that I consciously made happen. You see what I mean? It's like the practice actually has an impact and kind of does. I mean, a lot of things are like if you exercise, like, I don't, but I know people do this, and I've seen it. Look at Jimmy. Look at how good Jimmy looks, and but it's like you don't do it. I mean, you just do the practice, whatever that is, whatever the exercise you're doing, right? And the body transforms as you do the practice over time. But you don't like will yourself to get in shape, right? You don't like sit there like, I'm gonna just will myself to do it. But like, hey, I do this thing, and then, so it's like that. It's practicing meditation and any of these practices has an impact on us over time, but it's not something we do. That's why that word transformational, actually, I like that word a lot in that context. Anyways, we gotta end. It's been great to see everyone. And I'll say I'm actually leaving again. I'm just here very briefly, and I'm leaving for at least another 3 months this time, and I'm actually going to the UK, to Wales specifically. So you can't say England. That's what I've learned. You can't say I'm going to England if you're going to Wales. That's just wrong.
You're not going to Wales if you're going to England.
That's right. So yeah, and I'll be back in December. I wanted to say, I'm not sure, like, I don't know, I'm in a weird relationship to teaching. I want to say it. I'm thinking of like stepping away from teaching for a while. And just to, I kind of already have. I haven't taught very much this year since I've been in New York, a little bit. But yeah, we'll kind of see. I'm not making any like big decisions one way or the other, but I noticed that something's shifting, and that, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure where this will lead. But I am kind of taking, yeah, I think I'm going to take how do I put this? I'm not feeling particularly called to teach. Like, I used to really feel this urge, and this kind of felt very moved to teach. And lately I really haven't been feeling that. And so, I'm just kind of, in light of what we've been talking about, I'm just kind of listening to that and just seeing what it's saying. But it's a long conversation, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone, and I hope in the years that I have taught, and those of you who've known me for a long time, I hope whatever it is that I've shared over these years was useful and helpful to you. And I never, oh, thank you, Jimmy. Yeah, I never really saw myself as a teacher in a way. I was always just like, hey, I'm just trying to fucking make sense out of this mess, and I'm just trying to practice. And then after a while, I was like, well, I've been doing it for a while, and then it's like, yeah, I'm just kind of sharing my own notes from the journey. And yeah, and if it was helpful in any way, that makes me really happy.